fix this. I don't have any experience fixing microphones. Usually when I'm being recorded, in the past it was being interrogated and my hands were behind my back. So I don't have a whole lot of experience addressing those things. But it's a pleasure to be here. My sobriety date is August 28th of 1991. Just as I unpack my story, I think you'll come to appreciate it. If a guy like me can get sober, anybody can get sober. Thank you all for appreciating it. I promise, I won't do it anymore. Don't hit me no more. You know, we share our stories in a general way, what it used to be like, what it's like, what happened, what it's like now, right? I think it's important for the newcomer to hear what it was like when someone gets up here, because we need to identify, so you know that I'm just like you and we're in the same boat. For the old timer, I think it's important from my perspective. I need to hear that because I never want to forget what it was like, because it's easy to forget the pain. And I want to see and feel the pain. I don't ever want to experience that pain again. And we don't have to. That's the great news that this Friday gives us. So let me unpack things in a little bit of way, and I'll tell you a little story I heard actually from a sponsee not too long ago. You might find some humor in. He told me that before he got sober, he was driving home. He's an elderly guy, and he was driving home at about 2:30 in the morning. And he was driving down the road near where he lived. He got pulled over by the police. And the police said, "Sir, you were speeding. Where are you going in such a hurry at 2:30 in the morning?" Thinking quickly, the old man said, I'm going to a lecture on the dangers of drinking and driving." And I said, "Where in the world are you going to hear something like that? And who's giving that kind of talk at this time of night?" He said, "Well, I'm going home. That'll be my wife." So some people think I had a pretty sheltered experience the first 22 years of my sobriety. And I guess it's true in a sense. I lived in a gated community. I had round-the-clock security. I had people that cooked my food, did my laundry. And I had a long driveway going into my home with a big gate, and it said Florida State Prison on it. And my drinking and my disease took me to a place that nobody has to go. I didn't have to go there, but I chose to not stop drinking. I didn't have any choice in the matter, I thought, and that was where I had reached. But I did get sober there, and my life today is fantastic. And so let me unpack that a little bit. I grew up in St. Pete. I'm a Florida boy. And I used to come up here when we wanted to get in some trouble. And I joined the Air Force right out of high school, and they sent me to Cocoa Beach, so I guess it was my destiny to be in Florida. But I took my first drink at the age of 11 years old. And at that time, when I took that first drink, I had been abused and misused as a child in every way a child could be. And so I was very, very pained. I was full of pain. I was very uncomfortable in my own skin. I didn't fit in anywhere I went. I felt less than in most respects everywhere, even in my own home. And so when I took that drink, none of that changed. But I just didn't care. I went numb. I would drink for the next 20 years or so, and I was seeking that numb feeling. And I didn't care if you liked me or not. I didn't care if I fit in or not. I didn't care what you thought about me, or even if you did think about me, until I got sober again. So I joined sports and different things in school. I wanted to prove my manhood wherever I went. I was a violent kid. I was a rageful drinker. And I got in trouble in high school. We moved during the race riot times in Florida. We left and went to a place called Arkansas I didn't know existed. It's actually the only state that you may read the Bible. It's the only state that's mentioned in the Bible. Did you know that? It's in the Old Testament. It's where Noah, he looked out of the Arkansas. It's early. They're going to get worse. So we went to Arkansas. I learned to talk Arkansan. That really is a dialect. They taught me that in the Air Force. I joined the Air Force, became an air traffic controller, and they told me I had to lose the southern drawl. And I said, "What southern drawl?" And my family still talks like that, so when we visit them, I have to go to speech therapy for a few weeks when we get back. But went to Arkansas and continued my drinking. I was a blackout drunk at 17 years old. And I drank. I was not the life of the party. I was a danger of the party. I pulled guns on people. I threatened their lives. I was arrested for those things. Somehow I got out of it. I don't know that that was a good thing or not, because my behavior continued. Joined the Air Force, like I said. My drinking took off to new levels. And I was proud to serve. I love our country. I became an air traffic controller. Some of you that are old enough remember when we had a president called Reagan who fired all the air traffic controllers that went on strike, and the Air Force people moved into those spots, and it was an honor to serve the country. I never intended to become a criminal. I never intended to become an alcoholic, but I had already become one, just didn't know it. I continued the drinking, continued the violence, continued the bar fights, and sometimes in blackouts I would wake up places I didn't know how I got there. I didn't know what I had done. I don't know if anyone else in this room can relate to this, but I've actually been kicked out of the Denny's. That's low. That's a low bottom rung. Apparently, in a blackout, I had been using the women's bathroom urinal. Think about that for a moment. They look a lot like a sink. They asked me not to come back. And I didn't know that until I went back, and they told me I wasn't allowed to be. I've been barred from Denny's. So at the age of 21, the Air Force decided they were done. And they asked me to leave. I got an honorable discharge somehow. But my brother was a SEAL. I wanted to be special ops. That was where my head was at. I wanted to have a military career. And I gave it away. It wasn't taken from me. I gave it away because I continued to drink. Everything in my life became less important than my drinking. My military career, my marriage, my finances, everything took a lesser place in my life than my drinking. So I was put on probation. I went from air traffic control. I was on flight status. I got to flying fighters and drop missiles and do strafer runs down Avon Park. I remember looking down from the airplane, and I wasn't a pilot, but I was on flight status. So whenever there was an empty seat, I put my butt in it. But I remember looking down, and I saw these guys wearing blue uniforms. They were inmates in the Florida prison system, and they were working out at Avon Park at the missile range, at the fire range. And little did I know that I would spend close to 30 years wearing that same uniform. I got out of prison. I got out of the Air Force. And I went from air traffic control to pest control. Had a blue uniform. And I was spraying apartments in this area. And whenever I speak over in this area of the state and country, I make this caveat. If you lived here and you were in an apartment back in the early 1980s, and if money came up missing that you knew where it was there, or maybe food came up missing that was in your refrigerator, we might need to talk after the meeting. Because I was a thief. And I worked for 2.5 years stealing everything that I could, drinking everything that I could, eating your food, it was just ridiculous. And so, after about 2.5 years, I got caught. The way I got caught is, usually drug dealers don't call the police when their drugs are missing. So I got away with that one for quite a while. But they do report when money's missing, and they connected the dots, and they arrested me. I was on probation at the time. And they even let me out of jail. Kind of got lucky there. The night before I was supposed to go get resentenced to a little more probation, I decided it would be a good idea to have a party. And so that night, in another blackout, I crawled through my bedroom window, undressed down to my skivvies and socks, black socks, by the way, it becomes material in a moment. And I tried to go to sleep. I heard people talking in my house. I got up and I chased those people out of the house with a steak knife in my white underwear and black socks. And I came out of my blackout in a parking lot, in an apartment complex I did not live in, holding somebody else's steak knife, having just chased them out of their own apartment. They call that midnight armed burglary, and they don't like that. I got to go to prison that time for 7 years. I showed up in prison 23 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, and having been sexually abused as a kid, that was never going to happen to me again. And I spent the next 4.5 years fighting to make sure it didn't happen. And it didn't happen. But the rage that I felt inside, the anger that I felt inside, the pain that I felt inside didn't go away, it actually got worse. The only thing worse than being an alcoholic, using alcohol, is being an alcoholic untreated and not having alcohol. And boy, was I an animal. I can remember being so heartless and so cold and so uncaring. One morning I remember in prison, I was going to, Wednesday morning was banana morning in prison. And then you may not have ever been in prison, but you don't get bananas all the time. You don't get whatever you want all the time, but once a week you get a banana with your pancakes and oatmeal, and that was a big deal. There was a guy that we were in this dorm, and we were coming out of the dorm, we were all kind of packed in together, and we came around the corner, all, elbows to shoulders, and this guy was laying on the sidewalk, and he had his throat cut. There's blood on the wall, and I did not even pause in stepping over him to go get my banana. It didn't occur to me. It wasn't a decision. I just went and got my banana, and I did get my banana. That came back to me years later, because after I got sober and after I worked the steps and I had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, I got a heart. I got feeling. And I can no longer do that today, that I can sprout wings and fly. But it took a little while for me to get there. I got out of prison in 1987. I went to college, business major, marketing minor, Phi Beta Kappa. I didn't know what that meant when they told me I had earned that. It's an honor society. And I say that to say this. We are not stupid people. We are sick people. We're not even bad people. We just do bad things in our addiction, called alcoholism. So, about 4.5 years after being out of prison, I'm still drinking, by the way. It never occurred to me that I couldn't drink. That's delusion. It's not denial. I was having dinner with my sponsor and my wife just before we came here, and they said it was the last meal. I don't know what that was about. But I don't see the word denial in 164 pages of my big book. We say it a lot in our meetings. I was in denial. I was in denial. Denial is saying that I'm not wearing this blue blazer when I know that I am. Delusion is saying I'm not wearing this blazer and thinking really I'm not wearing a blazer. And that's what I was in as an alcoholic. I did not know that I was an alcoholic. It wasn't that I was denying the fact. Sure, I had a problem. I just don't need to drink quite so much. But as I'm looking back, drinking was never really the problem. Drinking was the solution. It's what got me through the hard times. It's what allowed me to live life until it didn't. So 4.5 years after I'm out, I never want to go back to prison again. Prison is a terrible place, isn't it? Gosh. But that's where I went. I was arrested for following a barmaid home. I don't remember doing that. Apparently she had stored some dry goods. I don't remember seeing that. And apparently I tried to steal them. I don't remember doing that. I woke up in a holding cell on August 27, 1991, and I didn't know why I was there. I was afraid I had a DUI, afraid I hurt somebody. I had committed another burglary. I reached into a car trying to steal something, and I scared the lady. That's assault. It's a first-degree felony, punishable by life. I had only been out of prison 4.5 years. That means that I was eligible to be a career criminal, which means that I could get life in prison. Well, I got a crooked judge. That actually does happen. And the judge wanted $5,000 from my father. My dad did not tell me that. I didn't have $5,000 in my name. I didn't have $5 in my name. I was out on bond. I was living from hand to mouth. But I tell you what, if I knew that it only took $5,000 for me to go to Operation Par over here, I would have stolen that from somebody. But I didn't know. And so the money wasn't paid. And instead of getting a plea, I had a plea to go to drug treatment 18 months at Operation Park. This was from Seminole County. The judge sentenced me to 70 years in prison as a career criminal. So, as far as I could tell, my life was over, wasn't it? You don't survive a 70-year sentence. He did suspend 35 years, which means that as long as I didn't get in any trouble in those first 35 years, I was 31 years old at the time, then I could get out. If I did get in any trouble, that 35 years that was hanging over my head suspended, it would come back in. So my nickname in prison was 70. I knew some people that their name was 99, so I wasn't doing quite as bad as them. But I was introduced to the program Alcoholics Anonymous by court order. I had to have a piece of paper signed. If you're here and you're having a piece of paper signed, God bless you. I'm so glad you're here. So glad you're here. I did not qualify for membership when I showed up, except I had to have a piece of paper signed. I did not have a desire to stop drinking. I just wanted to stop getting arrested. I wanted to keep the girl, keep the job, and not go to prison. I lost the job, went to prison, and lost the work. So AA really didn't work so well for me in the first year. But I stayed sober. Excuse me. And I went to prison, and I got a sponsor. I figured if I was going to spend my life in prison, I'm going to do it as happy as I can, because I saw something in your eyes in 1991 when I started coming to these meetings and I had a piece of paper signed. I started seeing something that I couldn't quite identify. I know now it was peace. I know now it was people that were content with their own circumstances, that they were comfortable in their own skin, and they were actually happy, joyous, and free. You know, I hear messages today about life sucks, but damn it, I'm sober. You know, that's not the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. The message of Alcoholics Anonymous will bring us to a place where we can live a happy, a joyous, and a free life. It'll take us through the transformation that is in the 12 steps into relationship with God. Do you know that the stories in the back of our big books, the first, second, third edition, all are introduced as this way? These people are telling their story of how they came into a relationship with God. God is mentioned 281 times in 165 pages. That's a pretty preeminent placement in our big book and in our program. On page 45 it says that this book was written to bring you into a relationship with a higher power. Therefore, out of necessity, we are going to talk about God. And I talk a lot about God because God has transformed my life. I do not live the way I did before. I'm a recovered alcoholic. And if you read your big book the way I read the big book, and I'm a wordsmith, I own a paralegal firm and I write appellate briefs for attorneys. Imagine that. All the money that I paid attorneys to keep me out of the pokey, I went to the pokey to learn the law, and now they pay me to keep up with it. But somewhere it's going to even out, I think. The word recovery, relating to an alcoholic, is not in our big book. It's recovery. People recover from this. It doesn't mean that I don't need to come to meetings. I do. It doesn't mean that I don't need to be sponsored, because I do. It doesn't mean that I need to stop carrying a message, because I do. But I do not live in a state of hopelessness. I do not live in a state of incomprehensible demoralization that I showed up in here with. Today I live a happy, joyous, free life in my right mind. Sanity has been restored. About 90% of the time. Right? But, so, there I was in prison. And I talked about what it was like. I talked about what happened. What happened was the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and working the 12 steps. And I really want the newcomers to hear this. Recovery, transformation is in the 164 pages of the big book. And I implore you, I beg you to give it a shot. If you want to go someplace you've never been before, you need a guide. It's called a sponsor. Not Google Maps, right? You need a sponsor to walk with these steps, because there's something magical about two people getting together, working the steps. I believe where two or more people are gathered, God's going to be there with you. The God that we meet in this program, you can have a different concept of God than I have, but He's still God. There's only one God. The Big Book says there's only one that has all power. That one is God. May you find Him now. I refer to Him as my Creator. The Big Book talked about the Creator too. I heard something kind of cool the other day, and it reminded me of what my life was myself before I was in relationship with God. When God created the fish, he spoke to the water, and he created fish. If you take the fish out of water, what happens to the fish? He dies. When God created the birds, he talked to the air. When you take the bird out of the air, unless he's a duck, he dies. When God created man, he spoke to himself. If you take the man away from God, or God away from man, what happens to the man? He doesn't live the way he was designed to live. I did not live the way I was designed to live until I came in relationship with God. And that is the design of living in this program. The solution is having a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. And we carry the message. And I started doing that in prison. I was actually in confinement, one-man cell, isolation they call it. I was there because I was accused of running the prison. And I took that as a compliment. My mind was so distorted when they showed up with a helicopter and a SWAT team and all these people to arrest me. I took that as a compliment. You know, I took that as bragging rights. When they locked me up in prison for running the prison, I had officers on my payroll. I had people bringing in dope, although I wasn't using it. I was sober, right? No, not sober mind. But so I had all these things going on, and they locked me up. In that cell, having worked the steps to the best of my meager ability, something happened to me that I didn't expect. Something happened to me that I wasn't looking for, and that was a spiritual awakening. I wish that we could go into the local AA department store and buy 10 spiritual awakenings to go and hand them out to our sponsees. Wouldn't that be cool? It doesn't work that way. You got to do the work. Don't complain about the results you haven't got for the work you haven't done. Do the work. You are worth it. This life is worth it. I got sober after that. I came out of that cell having had a spiritual awakening. I was a different person. I hear people with significant recovery saying, I'm the same person that walked in these rooms X amount of years ago. I hope not. I'm not. You don't have to lock your cars because I'm here. You don't. I'm not a thief today. I'm not a criminal today. In fact, I stopped being a criminal that day. And yet there I was in prison for another 20 years. Carrying this message, being sponsored, sponsoring other people. They used to give me urinalysis on a regular basis because nobody can be this happy in prison. I wasn't happy to be there, but I was happy while I was there, if that makes sense. I was happy, joyous, and free. I was content in my circumstances, even though it sucked. Prison is not a good place, right? Would someone tell me what time you had to go here? Someone said 10 o'clock, but I don't know.
25 hours.
Okay, 25 hours. Very good. So, got sober, working the steps. I want to tell you about the first prayer that I said. And I encourage you, if you have doubts about God's presence and his power, as I did when I got here, I was agnostic. I challenge you to say this one simple prayer. God, if you're real, reveal yourself to me. That was the only prayer that I could pray. And I prayed that. One of the first things that happened was I went back to county jail for court about 8 times, hoping to get a new trial, hoping to get a better sentence, whatever. I became a law clerk, got my paralegal degree while I was inside. And it was the first time I went back, I had my big book that I got in treatment in the county jail. And that is a prized possession of mine. It's a 3rd edition. Had a bunch of signatures from guys that went through a little, they called it a task cell. What was it? Treatment alternative to street crime. And so I had these guys' signatures in there. A lot of them are dead now because they didn't follow their own advice. Right? But I still had that book. But I couldn't take it to prison with me. So I went back to county jail. They called me to court on a day I did not have court. I tried to explain that to the bailiffs. They were not really receptive. If you've been in jail, you kind of know what I'm talking about. So I went to jail, and I went to court that day, and I sat in a holding cell and ate bologna and cheese sandwiches for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Came back, and I was in a cell I wasn't supposed to be in. It was a minimum custody cell. I was a maximum security inmate. They put me in the wrong cell. So they took me out of the cell on the wrong day, right? They put me in a holding cell on the way back, the wrong cell, right? It had an open front to it where you could reach your arms out, people walking up and down the hallway. I remember smelling perfume, and I realized that I hadn't smelled perfume in maybe a half a dozen years at that point. My sponsor that I had when I was in the county jail was coming to meetings that night. I didn't know that. He picked up a big book off his shelf, and he came to the meeting. He picked up my big book. I had left it with the guys in the cell when I went to prison 6 years earlier, and they gave it to him. Well, he took a wrong turn in the jail, went through a wrong area of the jail, and ended up in front of the cell where I wasn't supposed to be. And I remember that prayer, God, reveal yourself to me if you're real. And John handed me that big book that I have today. It's a prized possession. It may be a little thing, but I found that my faith was grown by small seeds. As I continue to walk through prison, you can imagine I spent 27 years in prison. I had to serve the rest of my life on probation. I've seen some things. And I was joking the other night, I heard just about anything you can hear in the fifth step department in prison. Very rarely do I pass a farm with animals that I don't think about this one particular sponsor. Anyway, I've been through riots where people were being massacred, and I walked across the compound as if I was invisible. There was one instance where I became a pretty effective law clerk, and I believe God put me in that position and used me to help people, and I've gotten hundreds of people out of prison. And I don't say that because I'm a swell guy, because I'm just a normal guy. But if we allow God, our Creator, to put us where He wants us to be, and we're in His will, my gosh, we can do some amazing things. Amazing things. In this one particular change of law, there was 285 people that left the prison that I was at to go back to court and get resentenced and get released or get their sentences reduced. Now, I will tell you that most police officers and most judges and most correctional officers are fine people doing a wonderful job. Not all of them. I had a crooked judge. I wanted to kill him. I'll tell you that story in a little bit. But there are some crooked correctional officers. And there were some crooked judges, obviously, and so forth and so on. Back in the county jail, they heard about me. They put me in confinement. I had been working in the law library, and I was just volunteering. I helped this young fellow. Thank you. And this young fellow, young black guy, came in. He had a 9th grade education. He was 17 years old. They had sentenced him to over 9 years, what he was supposed to be sentenced to. I helped him with his score sheet. Score sheet is actually, if you ever played bingo or played golf, that's how they sentence you in Florida. You get this crime, you get that many points. You get victim injury, you get this many points. You're on probation, you get this many points. And God will help you if you get Yahtzee. But when your points are totaled up, that's how many months you're getting in prison. They had messed us up due to this new law change. I helped him. He went before my judge, and who hated me and I hated him. And but I had been working a program, and I had been told that I had to pray and forgive that judge, not because of him, not for him, but because of me and for me. Didn't really understand that at first. My sponsor said, you need to start praying for that judge. And I said, okay, brain cancer, lung cancer, get hit by a bus. We got a bunch of things we could choose. And he said, you have to pray that that man is blessed in every way that you can imagine being blessed. I tell you, we do not think our way into right acting. We act our way into right thinking. When your sponsor tells you to do something that sounds absolutely crazy, just trust him or her and go do it, because they had learned from experience. So I did that, and I was able to forgive. Back in the county jail. So they throw me in confinement. There's a racial group, there's a racial group in prison for every race you can imagine, and some that don't even exist. But there's a lot of anger and hate, and however they mask it, that's how it's masked. There's one group called 5%ers, it's a black group, and they hate anything that doesn't look like them. And so there was a 5% cell, and if they didn't like you, if the officer didn't like you, they threw you in that cell. If they threw you in that cell, the purpose of you going in there was to get beat. They couldn't kill you, that was kind of the deal. But they could beat you. And for that, they would get extra food rations, which is a big deal in the county jail because unless you weigh 110 pounds and you're going to need some extra food. But anyway, they threw me in that cell. And I asked the officers why, and they said, we don't know, but it came from up on top. I know today. I surmise today it came from the judge. I walked into that cell, I set my stuff down. When I had a spiritual awakening, before that time I was violent. I was 260 pounds, I had 20-inch arms, I lived on a weight bottle. I thought fear was respect. So I wanted you to fear me as another inmate. And I did everything I could to do that, even though I was full of fear, full of insecurity. I would never admit it back then. But I made a commitment to God that I would no longer be violent unless I had to defend myself. Big commitment in prison. There's plenty of opportunities, because the idiots per square mile do not decrease just because you get a program. I promise you. They're still there, aren't they? So they threw me in the cell. There's 3 of them and 1 of me. Odds don't look too good. The big one about my size. I figured that's the first one I got to get, right? So they're putting their shoes on, and I am the wreck for the day. And the big one looks at me, and I already had it played out in my mind what I was going to try to do. The officers told me they'd be back in 20 minutes. I'm praying the serenity prayer. I'm praying the 3rd step prayer. God, remove these difficulties from me. Because I know that if you do, I'll be able to share this with somebody else and share them and witness to them your power, your love, and your way of life. I know I'll be able to do that if you get me out of this situation. Well, the big guy looked at me and asked me why I was put in there, called me by a racial name that I'll not mention. And I said, I don't know, I'm a law clerk. This happens to us sometimes. And it did. I mean, that just happens as a law clerk in prison. And he looked at me, he said, are you that such and such law clerk? No racial name. From prison, working in the law library from midnight to 4 a.m.? Yeah. He said, man, you got 9 years off my nephew's case. Now, there was almost 2,000 people in that jail. What are the odds that I would be put in that cell with those 3 guys, and one of those guys would be the uncle of the man that I helped? See how God works? These seeds of faith will be planted if you are open to them. Pray, God, if you're real, God, if you're real, reveal yourself to me. There was another incident when you go to a new compound, sometimes you're tried, they call it. It could be a little thing like a bump on the elbow, you can't let it go. Someone cuts a line, you can't let it go. In this particular case, this huge guy, they call it Big Jack. He was a big guy, over 300 pounds. He told me I had to go he told me publicly in a big cell block that I had to go get him something to eat from the canteen. And if I didn't do it, there was going to be, a mess. Well, I'm not going to do that. Couldn't do that, right? But I did go to the canteen and I did get something called an 18-wheeler, a big cheeseburger. And I ate that thing because I thought it might be my last meal. And I also bought a bunch of number 2 pencils and I sharpened them up real good and put them all over myself. I didn't want to use them. I sat there praying the 3rd step prayer. Asking God for this to pass, so that I wouldn't have to do anything. In about 20 minutes, I came back from the chow hall, cell block full of people, 2 tiers, concrete, echoes, and this big 300 and some odd pound man who's yelling across the cell block, called me by my last name, Mr. So-and-so. I am so sorry, I didn't know who you were. My first thought was, who am I? Right? I hadn't been violent in years. I wasn't a badass. But yet, God showed up and turned this whole situation around. For 20 years, I walked in the worst places the prison system has to offer, and I didn't have one hand laid on me. I was never robbed. I never had to defend myself. I had to be ready a few times. Because, meekness is not weakness. Meekness is controlled strength. I picture meekness as a battleship coming into port. It has enough firepower to destroy the entire town, maybe even half of the state that it's coming into. Yet, it comes in quietly and just stops beside it. And that's how a spiritual person walks his life. I had a sponsee call me yesterday. He was having problems with work. Don't forget whose you are. Who are you in relationship with? Who is guiding your life? Who do you have faith in? Is it your boss or is it your God? I was out mountain biking. By the way, this judge, let me go back to that for a moment. Remember, he wanted a bribe. He sentenced me to prison. I got a tattoo on my arm. That's an arm reaching out through the razor wire with justice scales and lightning bolts. I was a marksman in the Air Force. I wasn't a sniper, but I can hit a small target from quite a ways. I had planned all kinds of ways to get back to this judge, and my plan was to get out one way or another and take him out. But then my sponsor told me I had to pray for him. I remember he said I had to pray on my knees. I'm in an open bay dorm at the time, and there's gangbangers in there, and there's some pretty violent people in there, and I don't want to look weak in there. And he explained to me, you won't be weak, you'll be meek. I didn't know the difference, but I didn't know what else to do except follow instructions. I knew I didn't want to live the way I did before, so I got down on my knees on by that prison bunk, and I prayed. And I started becoming a praying person. The people that I most feared in that cell that would see me as weak started asking me to pray for their families. Imagine that. God, if you're real, reveal yourself to me. So, I'm getting ready to get out of prison. What does a career criminal do? By the way, I'm a career criminal. And they did designate me that. The judge did, not the state attorney. So I'm getting out of prison. What am I going to do? I picture myself wearing one of those Liberty tax signs. And if you're doing that, I think that's great. It's better than not working, isn't it? Law firms started coming to the prison and interviewing me for a job. Folks, that doesn't happen. I walked out of prison. I didn't know which job to take. So I asked God to make it simple. One of them said, we have a house you can rent as part of your pay package. It's in Riverview. That's where we live. I said, okay. I did that. And so I started working for that company. It's 2013 I got out of prison. I was making $1,000 a week for someone who spent 27 years in prison. That was pretty good money. And I went to a juvenile law seminar in 2014, and guess who was there? The judge. Now, I had forgiven him. My heart was clear, and I actually prayed. I remember the story I read in a good book, and it's about 3 cousins that were taken captive, and they were in a foreign land, and they would not compromise their spiritual principles. They stuck to their guns. They were praying men like I had become. And because of that, they were given the death penalty, and they were thrown in a furnace. The furnace so hot that the people that threw them in there died, as the story goes. And the king looked in, he saw all 3 of them in there, but there was a 4th walking around with them, and they said, hey, the king called to him, how come there's 4 people in there, we only threw 3? And the answer was, it's our God who's in the furnace with us. I thought that was a wonderful story. And I started praying that story in my life. I said, when I get out of prison, I don't want to smell of prison. Now, I still speak prison. I get letters from prisoners all the time. My wife, my beautiful wife here that I'll tell you about in just a moment, she's the marketing director for my law firm, and she reads these letters and she can't understand them, so I have to interpret. So I do speak prison. I also speak Arkansan and sometimes English. So the judge was there. I walked up to the judge. As I was walking up to him, he went into the bathroom. I thought that would not be a good place to be. So I waited outside, and he came out, and I shook his hand, and I told him 22 years earlier at that time, he had presided over my case, and he'd ordered that I had to have a piece of paper signed going in an AA meeting. And I thanked him for that, because it was his making me go as a condition of my bond that caused me to hear a message I didn't know about, to want something I didn't know existed, and to do things I had never known before to get the life that I had that day and still have today. And he was happy. He smiled real big, pumping my hand, and I said, you also sent me to prison for a very long time. And he couldn't get rid of my hand quickly. And I said, and God used that for good, because without that, I wouldn't be here. Maybe I'm different. Maybe I'm a little bit more stubborn. I had to wake up for 22 years straight since I got sober looking at the consequences of my last drink. I'll tell you that you don't have to do that. Let me do that for you. So I called TJ right after that. We had just met in a clubhouse, and we were dating at the time, and what a wonderful experience that was. But I told her the story. So I got out of prison. I was married. The marriage flopped with a quickness, and it was painful, and I did everything I could do to make sure it didn't happen. I even prayed that it wouldn't happen. I'm so grateful today that it did fail. Because without that, I wouldn't have experienced what true love is, what true marriage and commitment is, what a true healthy relationship is. And I'll tell you something else, newcomers. If you're wondering, if you're alone, you haven't met that special someone right now, and you're wondering when you're going to meet them, I'll tell you when you're going to meet them. When God can trust you to meet them. When you become the very best person you can be, you will meet the very best person you can meet. God will not trust you with the keys to that kind of relationship until you're ready to treat the person that you meet with the utmost respect and love and dignity that they deserve. You know, I attracted what I was when I was so dysfunctional. I'm so glad I did the work that I didn't know I needed to do. I'm so glad I worked the steps that I didn't know how to work. I'm so glad that I got a sponsor who told me to do things I thought was crazy. So I'm at an AA meeting, and I hear a lady speak, and she's around the corner, and I can't see her, but I heard her speak with such strength and dignity and sobriety and spirituality, and I said, that I need to hear more of that. That's just awesome. And then I saw her, and I was so intimidated to talk to her, right? Guys, you know what I'm talking about, right? You go to talk to the girl, and you speak some language that's not indecipherable on this planet. You know, you think you're being suave and debonair, but what they hear just puts a smile on their face. You poor thing. That was how our first conversation went. And she's a personal trainer, so I hired her for personal training. And one of the most expensive first dates I've ever had. Before the date, I confessed to her on a text or an email that I had other motivations. Because it is an honesty program, isn't it? You know, if we're not honest in every area of our lives, that'll come back and we'll pay the price. You know, I love what Luke said. I can't take a little bit of paper from work. It's that little thing. You know, how that manifests in your life is directly proportional to your spiritual condition with God. Because God's going to direct you in places that you don't know you need to be corrected. You know, it's kind of like I'm doing an onion, right? You don't know what's the next level, what the next layer is until you peel it off. Well, I confessed to her that I had some personal motivations, and she said, "Well, I'm seeing somebody, and that can't happen, but I'll still train you." And so we hung up and stuff, and I was thinking, you know, who do I know that's a hitman that got out of prison? And some names came up, you know, but. Fortunately, I didn't call anybody. She came, we trained, and she went home that night and broke up with the fellow. They had a meeting, and she said his life was in jeopardy. He needed to leave town. But and I'd like to tell you folks that we did everything mature and slow and methodical. But like we joke about it, you know, what comes with you on the second date in AA? A U-Haul. That's right. It wasn't quite that bad, but we did everything wrong, but God did everything right. And we ended up, here I am, a career criminal, on probation for 35 years as a career criminal. They let me go to Hawaii. More importantly, God had provided an income that allowed us to afford it. We shared the expenses, went to Hawaii for almost a month. We were married in an island called Maui. So we have a sign that we're holding that said we got Maui. We formed a company. It was a company name that I was given in prison, right after my spiritual awakening. Prisoner Connections. You can look it up online. And Prisoner Connections was designed to connect prisoners with good attorneys. attorneys that wouldn't take advantage of them. And I'm the conduit. And the company grew, and it exploded, and it's hugely successful, and it employs right now around 10 people. We were up to 20 one time, but it just got crazy. And we're helping people. And we're making a good living. Let me describe my life to you today. And I do this because I want the newcomer to see what's possible. I walked out of prison in 2013, basically holding what you could fit in a Publix plastic bag. I had a job and I had a place to live. Today, we own a company that's very successful and provides us a wonderful income. We live in a house, that same house we bought. It's a 3-bedroom lakefront home with a huge pool. We have AA events there all the time. We'll have a New Year's party if you want to hear about it. Get with Chris, he'll give you the information. You can come to us, open house. We drove here in a Corvette that I bought for my wife for her birthday in January, and she lets me drive sometimes. We just got back for 3 months RVing all over the country. We're down to Colorado for a couple of conferences. We get to travel, both of us, and share our story in places, and we meet family we've never met before. They're taking us to the Caribbean for Halloween, and we got really creative. It's a costume type deal, so we're going to be jailbirds. Kind of fitting, isn't it? We have a relationship that is easy, that's nurturing, that's fun. She's my best friend. I have a relationship with God today. The church that we attend asked me to go through an ordination process to become an elder. It blew my mind. And I asked them, do you remember my past? Because I'm pretty transparent about it. And they said, yeah, we want you to be an elder. That was such an honor. And it's a direct result of this program. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. And I will give you this guarantee. If you work the program of Alcoholics Anonymous as it is written in the black pages and the white pages, black words on white pages, in the 164 pages and Dr. and Bill's story, I guarantee you a wonderful life. Rarely have we seen a person fail if they thoroughly follow this path. The problem that we're running into today is people are not thoroughly following this path. Well, I'll do the A thing, I don't want the A thing. Well, I'm not going to carry the message. Well, I don't need to sponsor anybody. I think the most selfish thing you can do in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is come here, get sober, and have a sponsor lead you through the steps and then not follow along with sponsoring other people. You got to give it away. It's the only thing that I know of that the more you give it away, the more you get. When I start feeling funky, and we do. I had a heart attack in 2019 out mountain biking and almost died. I had to replumb my whole chest, right? Crack me open, take the heart out, put me, all this stuff. And then I almost died afterwards. I'll tell you what, as I laid in that ICU, and they chased my wife out, and they were getting the crash cart, and they were saying, we're losing them. Guess what I felt? Peace. Contentment. God was with me. I knew He had me in His hand. I knew He wouldn't let me go. And all I said was, God, if it's my time, I'm ready. Please take care of TJ. And that's not because I'm a swell guy. It's because I have a relationship with a transformational God. If I could have changed myself, I would have. God will get on the inside of you as a result of working these steps. That's what I think a spiritual awakening is. And as a result of that, you're going to become a new person. And you're going to be happy, joyous, and free. Trust me. If this guy can have sanity restored and live the life that I'm living today, anybody can, if you're willing. Thank you for letting me share. Great.